I'm going to say something that might make you uncomfortable, but I've been holding it in for too long and I just can't do it anymore. I'm 66 years old and I've watched retirement destroy almost every single person I grew up with. Not slowly, not gracefully. I'm talking about people who were sharp, funny, capable, full of life, and within a year of walking away from their jobs, they became people I barely recognized. I'm not being dramatic, I wish I was, but I've seen it happen so many times now that I can almost predict it. And the worst part is, nobody warned us. Nobody sat us down and said, hey, be careful, because what's coming next might be the hardest thing you've ever gone through. They just handed us a cake, maybe a watch if we were lucky, and said, congratulations, you've earned it. Go enjoy yourself. And that was supposed to be the happy ending. Let me tell you about my friend Bill. Bill and I worked together for over 20 years. He was an engineer, brilliant guy, the kind of person who could fix anything, figure out anything, solve any problem you put in front of him. He was the first guy you called when something went wrong, and he loved it. Not just the work, but the feeling of being needed, of walking into a room and knowing that people were counting on him. He retired at 63. His wife threw him a big party. His kids flew in from out of state. Everyone made speeches about what a great career he had. And Bill stood there smiling, talking about all the things he was finally going to do. He was going to fix up his boat. He was going to travel. He was going to learn to cook Italian food. He had this whole list. I remember thinking, good for him, he deserves it. 6 months later, I barely recognized him. He'd gained weight. He wasn't sleeping well. He stopped returning calls. When I finally got him on the phone, he sounded like a different person. Flat, tired, like the energy had just been drained out of him. I asked him how the boat was coming along, and he said he hadn't touched it. I asked about the cooking, and he laughed, but not in a good way. He said he mostly just watches TV now. That's what he said. I mostly just watch TV now. This was a man who used to run a department of 40 people, a man who could rebuild an engine from memory. And now he was sitting in his living room at 2 in the afternoon watching game shows and waiting for his wife to come home so he'd have someone to talk to. And here's the thing. Bill isn't unusual. Bill is the rule. I could tell you 20 stories just like his, 30. Guys who were forces of nature at work, leaders, problem solvers, men who defined themselves by what they did and how well they did it. And then one day they stopped doing it. And they had absolutely no idea who they were without it. That's the part nobody prepares you for. You spend 40 years building an identity around your job, your title, your expertise, the people who depend on you. And then overnight, all of it disappears. And you're left standing in your kitchen on a Tuesday morning with nothing to do and no one expecting anything from you. And it hits you like a truck. You don't matter the way you used to. Maybe you don't matter at all. I know that sounds harsh, but I've lived it. I retired 3 years ago, and I'll be honest with you. The first year almost broke me. I didn't see it coming. I thought I was ready. I had plans. I had hobbies. I told everyone I was looking forward to it. And for the first few weeks it was fine. It felt like a vacation. I slept in. I read books. I took walks. I thought, this is great. Why didn't I do this sooner? But then the weeks turned into months and something started to shift. The phone stopped ringing. Not all at once, but gradually. The guys I used to grab lunch with every week, they were still working. They had their own lives. They didn't mean to forget about me, but that's exactly what happened. I went from seeing people every single day to sometimes going 3 or 4 days without a real conversation. And I started to feel something I'd never really felt before in my life. I felt invisible. That's the word I keep coming back to. Invisible. Because that's what retirement does to you if you're not careful. It makes you disappear. Not physically, you're still there. You're still walking around, going to the grocery store, picking up prescriptions. But you're not part of anything anymore. You don't have a role. You don't have a place where people expect you to show up. You're just a guy. An old guy with time on his hands. And the world moves on without you and doesn't even notice. My neighbor Dave retired about a year before I did. He was a high school principal. 32 years. The man ran that school like a ship. Knew every kid's name. Knew every teacher's family situation. He was the backbone of that community. The day he retired, they named the auditorium after him. There was a ceremony and everything. Beautiful. And I watched him stand up there with tears in his eyes, feeling like the most important person in the world. That was the peak. That was the last day he felt like that. Because after the ceremony, everyone went back to their lives and Dave went home. And he's been home ever since. His wife told my wife that he just wanders around the house. He starts projects and doesn't finish them. He drives to the school sometimes and just sits in the parking lot. She said she's worried about him. She said it's like living with a ghost. That story breaks my heart because I understand it completely. When you've spent your whole life being someone, being needed, being the person who holds things together, and then suddenly you're not, it doesn't just hurt your ego. It hurts something deeper than that. It hurts your soul. You start asking questions you never had time to ask before. What am I doing? What's the point? Does anyone actually need me, or am I just taking up space? And those questions don't come with easy answers, especially at 66, especially when your body is starting to slow down and your friends are getting sick and the world around you is changing so fast you can barely keep up. I watched my generation handle this in different ways. Some guys threw themselves into golf or fishing or woodworking, and for some of them it worked. They found something to care about and they built a routine around it. But for a lot of them it was just filling time, going through the motions, pretending to be busy so they didn't have to face the emptiness. I know a guy who plays golf 5 days a week, 5 days. And if you ask him if he's happy, he'll say, "Sure, I'm living the dream." But his eyes tell a different story. His eyes say, "I have no idea what I'm doing with my life, and I'm terrified that this is all there is." Some guys went the other direction. They just shut down, stopped going out, stopped calling people, started drinking more than they should, started sleeping 12 hours a day. Their wives would tell you they're depressed, but they'd never use that word themselves. They'd say they're tired. They'd say they're just taking it easy. But you can see it. You can see the light going out behind their eyes. And it's the scariest thing in the world to watch, because you know it could be you. You know it almost was you. The women handle it differently in some ways, but the result is often the same. My wife's friend Linda retired from teaching 2 years ago. She was the most social person you ever met, always organizing things. Book clubs, dinner parties, volunteering at the church. She was the glue that held her whole friend group together. After she retired, she kept it up for a while. But slowly the invitations dried up. People got busy. The younger teachers she mentored moved on. And Linda started spending more and more time alone. She told my wife she feels like she's already been forgotten. She said it's like I died, but nobody held a funeral. That's not sadness talking. That's a woman who gave everything to her community and realized the community didn't need her as much as she thought it did. And you know what really gets me? The conversations that don't happen. I had lunch with a group of guys I used to work with about a year ago, 4 of us, all retired. And we sat there for 2 hours talking about nothing. Sports, the weather, what we had for dinner last night, surface-level garbage. And I could see it in every single one of their faces. They were struggling. They were lonely. They were scared. But nobody said it. Nobody had the guts to look across the table and say, "Hey, I'm not doing well. Are you doing well?" Because men our age don't do that. We were raised to be tough, to handle it, to never let anyone see you sweat. And that training served us fine for 40 years in the workplace. But in retirement, it's killing us, literally killing us. Because the loneliness builds and the silence grows and the days start to blur together, and you've got nobody to talk to about it because talking about it would mean admitting you're not okay. And admitting you're not okay feels like the one thing you can't do. I read somewhere that men over 60 are one of the highest risk groups for depression, and nobody talks about it. Nobody. Because from the outside we look fine. We've got our houses and our pensions and our golf games. We've got grandkids and retirement accounts and all the things you're supposed to have at this age. But inside, a lot of us are falling apart. And the people around us don't see it because we've spent our whole lives learning how to hide it. We're experts at looking fine. We could win awards for looking fine. But looking fine and being fine are two completely different things. And I wish someone had told me that before I spent my first year of retirement perfecting the act. My brother-in-law Tom retired 2 years before me. He was a firefighter, 31 years on the job. The man saved lives for a living. He walked into burning buildings. He pulled people out of car wrecks. Every single day he went to work knowing that what he did mattered, that if he didn't show up, someone might die. Try replacing that with a crossword puzzle. Try replacing that with a trip to Home Depot. Tom told me once, about 8 months after he retired, he said, "Frank, I spent 31 years being the guy who runs in when everyone else runs out. Now I'm just the guy who runs to the pharmacy." And he laughed when he said it, but I could hear the crack in his voice. He wasn't joking. He was grieving. He was grieving the loss of the person he used to be. And nobody around him understood that because on paper his life looked perfect. Healthy pension, loving family, nice house. What's there to complain about, right? Everything. Everything is there to complain about when the thing that made you feel alive is gone. I think the cruelest part of all this is that we were told our whole lives that retirement was the goal, the finish line, the reward for decades of hard work. Every commercial, every financial advisor, every magazine article, they all painted this picture of retirement as paradise. You and your spouse on a beach somewhere, playing with grandkids, finally free. And we believed it. We worked toward it. We saved for it. We counted down the years. And then we got there and discovered that nobody told us what to do once we arrived. Nobody mentioned the loneliness, the loss of purpose, the way your identity crumbles when you no longer have a title or an office or a team that needs you. Nobody mentioned that freedom without purpose isn't freedom at all. It's just emptiness with better weather. I'm not saying this to be hopeless, I'm really not, because I did find my way through it eventually. But it took me a long time, and it was harder than anything I did in my career. Harder than any deadline. Harder than any crisis at work. Because at work the problems were external. You could see them, you could fix them. But this problem was inside me. It was the question of who am I now? And I couldn't Google the answer. I couldn't delegate it. I had to sit with it, day after day, in the quiet of my own house, with no one to tell me what to do next. What saved me, and I mean that literally, was accepting that the old version of me was gone. The guy who walked into that office every morning with a purpose and a plan and people who needed him, that guy doesn't exist anymore, and he's not coming back. And grieving that was necessary. I had to actually mourn the loss of my old self before I could figure out who the new self was supposed to be. Nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you that retirement is a death of sorts. Not a physical death, but a death of identity. And like any death, it requires grief before it allows healing. I started small. I started volunteering at the library 2 mornings a week. Not because I love books, although I do, but because I needed a place to be. A place where someone expected me to show up. That's all it was at first, just showing up. But slowly it became something more. I got to know the people there, the other volunteers, the regulars, the kids who came in after school. And I started to feel like I was part of something again. Not the way I was part of something at work, smaller, quieter, but real. I also started walking every morning, not for exercise, although that's part of it, but because it got me out of the house before the silence could swallow me. I'd walk through the neighborhood and wave at people and stop to pet dogs and just be present in the world. It sounds so simple it's almost embarrassing to say out loud. But when you've spent months feeling invisible, the act of walking outside and being seen by other human beings is powerful. It reminded me that I was still here, still alive, still part of the fabric of things. And I started being honest. With my wife, with my friends, with myself. I stopped saying I'm fine when I wasn't fine. I stopped pretending that every day was great. I told my wife I was struggling and she cried because she already knew. She'd been watching me disappear for months and didn't know how to bring it up. And just saying it out loud, just admitting that I was lost, it didn't fix everything, but it cracked something open. It let the air in. I'm telling you all this because I know there are people watching this who are going through exactly what I went through. Maybe you just retired and you're starting to feel the ground shift under you. Maybe you retired years ago and you've been pretending everything is fine, but deep down you know it's not. Maybe your spouse retired and you're watching them become someone you don't recognize. I want you to know that you're not crazy, you're not weak, you're not ungrateful. What you're feeling is real and it's common, and it's one of the most underreported crises facing our generation. We were sold a lie, not intentionally, but a lie all the same. We were told that if we worked hard enough and saved enough money, the ending would take care of itself. But it doesn't. Money doesn't give you purpose. Free time doesn't give you meaning. A pension doesn't tell you who you are when the alarm clock stops ringing. Those are things you have to build for yourself. And building them at 66 is harder than building them at 26, because at 26 the whole world is in front of you. At 66 it feels like most of it is behind you. And that feeling, that sense that your best days are over, that's the thing that destroys people. Not retirement itself, but the belief that there's nothing worth building anymore. I refuse to believe that. I'm 66 years old and I refuse to believe that my story is over. I refuse to sit in my living room and wait for the end. I've watched too many good people do that. I've watched too many sharp, brilliant, capable people just give up and fade away because nobody told them that the hardest chapter of their life was going to come after the career ended, not during it. And I'm not going to let that be my story. If you're sitting there right now feeling lost, feeling invisible, feeling like the world has moved on without you, I need you to hear me. It's not too late. It's not too late to find something that matters. It's not too late to build something new. It's not too late to walk outside and remind the world that you're still here. You're still here. And that matters more than you know. Even if nobody's said it to you in a while. Even if the phone doesn't ring like it used to. Even if the office you gave your life to has already forgotten your name. You are still here. And as long as you're here, there's still time to become someone new. Someone you might actually like even more than the person you used to be. I have to believe that. I have to. Because the alternative is just sitting in the dark waiting for the clock to run out. And I've done enough of that to last a lifetime. I've sat in that dark room, I've stared at that ceiling, and I made a decision to get up. Not because it was easy, but because staying down was worse. And if you're still sitting in that dark room right now, I'm asking you, please, get up. The world still needs you, even if it forgot to say so.